about how they represent us and how they try to bridge the different perspectives we as society have. Rick has been in Congress for nearly 20 years and clearly has a diverse geographic and population that represents many views. And he's shown a moderate, clear thinking approach that has kept him to be attractive to all of us in this district. He's very interested in the aviation industry and chairs that committee. He is also on very pro-growth and also conscious of the environment and on armed services. And I take great pride that he is a hometown kid who has certainly kept us in mind as he's worked for our nation and has done a great job. So Rick, great to have you here. We'll ask a few questions after you finish your prepared remarks and your PowerPoint. I think they're going to share the screen with you and we'll let you go forward.
Yeah, I've been assigned as a co-host. We'll see if this works. Dangerous thing to allow me to do this. So let me see what I'm doing here. I hope it's the screen. Let's go. Just give me a little time here. I don't know. What are you all seeing there?
Screen broadcast.
Okay.
You're sharing screen.
Yeah. No presentation though? No presentation?
It might be loading.
You got,
there it comes. I think.
I was gonna say, do you have two monitors?
Of course not.
Oh, okay. Well,
It's like something that, members of Congress are very frugal. We don't do those kinds of things. So I'm gonna try one more thing, and then I'll just go on now. Okay, that's ridiculous. All right. Well, I can, I've made stuff up before, so I'll do it again. Rather than fight the technology, I want to just cover some things for folks. And so imagine, if you will, a PowerPoint presentation with the first slide. What I wanted to do is cover some highlights of what's going on in Congress right now, and then a few things about the CARES Act. Today, actually, I'm in Washington, D.C., and we are taking up the Justice in Policing Act. And that bill is a piece of legislation that's been developed over the last several weeks, including with input from local elected leaders in the district, in the 2nd district, and from community leaders throughout the district. It's an effort to respond to actually longstanding issues around police reform. The murder of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, and of Ahmaud Arbery have all really highlighted the continued systemic racial injustice in the United States. And the Justice in Policing Act is a piece of trying to address that. Maybe Lindsay's going to try to start the screen. Yeah. I think, is the screen coming up? You all see that screen?
Yes.
All right. So that's kind of the intro on the Justice and Policing Act. It includes several changes to existing law. It changes criminal standard to charge officers. It changes qualified immunity. On practice and pattern investigations, it requires a use of force reporting to the Department of Justice in order to create that necessary database so that the DOJ, the federal DOJ, use that database for investigations of pattern and practice among law enforcement agencies around the country. Next slide. There's a variety of other things, including training on racial bias and duty to intervene. I would note Washington State's requirements are much higher than than most other states. And part of the issue here is that there's very inconsistent training standards, as minimum training standards from state to state, but what states choose to do beyond those standards is very, very different. There's the ban on no-knock warrants in drug cases. That was a contributing factor to the Breonna Taylor shooting in Louisville, Kentucky. A ban on chokeholds and carotid holds, a police misconduct registry, which a lot of agencies in Washington state actually report into, but it is not a requirement for agencies to do that. So again, some of these things we already do pretty well in Washington state among our law enforcement agencies. And finally, there's a Section 1033 program restricting the transfer of surplus military equipment to local law enforcement. And on this, we're not talking about blankets or maybe Kevlar gear that's surplus to the military. We're talking about military grade weapons, military ammunition, Humvee and MRAPs, and other things that make our police look like the military, which is really no one's intent to do. So those are some of the provisions of Justice and Policing Act. We'll be voting on that bill later, actually later today. As I said, I'm in DC, so about, I'll look at my clock, maybe in about 5 or 6 hours, we'll be voting on that. Next slide. And then next week, we will be working on the Moving Forward Act. The Moving Forward Act is a transportation and infrastructure bill that we'll be moving forward on. The idea being that transportation investment, certainly in our state, means jobs, means creating jobs, and means supporting the long-term jobs. The Moving Forward Act represents a robust federal investment in infrastructure, and especially in the era of COVID-19, it does represent a part of a longer-term economic recovery plan based on infrastructure. And then, as I always note, you can't have a big league economy with little league infrastructure, and that continual investment into roads, bridges, highways, transit, into water and sewer infrastructure, and a lot of other things that we sometimes take for granted doesn't happen by accident. It happens because we make a choice to make that investment. Next slide. So just here's 5 components of it. I won't go into a lot of detail on it. I would note on the second band there's just through the regular formula that distributes federal dollars to the state, Washington state over the 5-year life of the bill would get about $7 billion for their roads, bridges, and highways formula, as well as for the transit systems around the state. The third band there on clean transportation includes an investment into low and no emission transit. So, City of Everett is investing into electric buses. Whatcom Transit is doing so as well. Community Transit is looking at it. And the bottom one there is pretty important too, funding for affordable housing, broadband access, and schools. So in terms of affordable housing, think of our affordable housing agencies in just Snohomish County, which would include Housing Hope and include things like the Snohomish County Housing Authority, or Housing Authority of Snohomish County, ASCO. So we're looking at expanding dollars available to them to address affordable housing for people who are on the margin. Next slide. Some other highlights. These are just big numbers for national numbers. I won't go through all of them. I think I'd focus on, just for us, the $245 million for passenger ferries. We have the largest ferry system in the country based on both numbers of vehicles and numbers of passengers. And so Washington State will benefit greatly from an increase in the funding for this bill. And then on rail safety, I have this district, 2nd district, which is fairly narrow, east to west, and it is it's not a lot of room between the water and where my district runs, but it also where the BNSF runs as well. And so these CRISI grants, I forget what CRISI stands for, but essentially it's for rail safety and rail grade separation. So separating railroad from the roads that it crosses, or the roads that cross the railroad, however you want to look at it. So that's a big investment. And then for bridge investments, it's huge. You know, we're on I-5. The investment on bridges on I-5 is important. On other highway system bridges, Old 99, bridges on Old 99 would be covered under these bridge investments as well. So again, major investment into the basic infrastructure in the United States. Next slide. And then these are some non-transportation highlights. I won't go over this again. I would note the broadband infrastructure is important, especially as we've seen with COVID-19, the digital divide, not just between different school districts, but within our school districts. The digital divide has been shown to be pretty wide in terms of getting kids the ability to upload and download their assignments since they're all going to school virtually, and that's just one reason why broadband access continues to be a major focus of investment. Next slide. This is I'll take a look at it. I'll go on to the next slide and get to the CARES Act here. Yeah. So I'm not going to go over all of this, but in late March we passed the CARES Act, and overall a $2.2 trillion investment to a wide variety of recipients in order to help weather the COVID-19 storm. There's a lot in that, and there's a lot here listed, and we can send this PowerPoint to you all later, but I'll go to the next slide. I want to show this slide just to show how much is there. There's a lot going on in the CARES Act. Now for Snohomish County, what it meant is $143 million direct allocation. Then those the county and then as well as local cities like Arlington have used some of these dollars to create small business grant programs. It also included higher education emergency relief, and half of that being used for emergency grants to students. So Everett Community College got $3.3 million, Edmonds Community College $2.9 million. There's also this program called Community Development Block Grants, and those there are only 3 entities in the county that have the CDBG program directly, and they are Snohomish County, City of Everett, and City of Marysville, who use those, which use those dollars in part for local grants to support businesses through a small business grant program. And then I would note on the healthcare providers, provider relief, think of your local physician, think of the local hospital, think of your local physical therapist. I got a call early on when the Department of Health and Human Services distributed the first dollars electronically. I got a call from a physical therapist from, I think, Marysville, could have been from Arlington, just calling surprised that he got this money from Medicare, but it was dollars to help these local providers keep their doors open, even virtually, so that they are still there for us when we get to the other side of this. And I would note community transit, it's got $39.2 million to keep the buses running as best as they can, which it did, and now they're starting to get back and put service back on the road. Next. So in the city of Arlington, just keeping it local here, there's $582,000 for a relief fund. Again, using some of that money for COVID-19 relief expenses directly, as well as for small business grants. The airport got $69,000 directly through an airport grants program, and that $69,000 was used for some capital improvements at the airport. Then the school district is getting, at least according to formula, $428,000, which won't be distributed to July 31st, and that'll come directly from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. I'm not particularly pleased that it's not until July 31st, and we're making our concerns known to the governor. Stanwood as well, just keeping it in the North County, again, $210,000 for the city, and then the school district itself getting $379,000. Next. So, there's a lot to cover, but there's a lot going on. It'll be a very busy late June and July in Congress. That's where the Justice and Policing Act comes into play. Next week is the Moving Forward Act. And I wanted to give you all a flavor of where these CARES Act dollars are going, because it can seem sometimes like we're doing, we're running to stand still, or it looks like we're trying to do something. I think the CARES Act dollars are really showing they're going into the communities, but we are continually bird dogging the Department of Treasury, the White House directly on these dollars and where they're going, to be sure they're getting into our communities. So with that, I'll have Lindsay take the slideshow off and go to questions. Bob,
Rick, I'll start the first question. I see that there is a Senate bill for justice, and I see the House is going to pass probably the justice bill today. And how do you, as a House of Representatives, ensure that the message is we respect law enforcement and the job they do, as well as wanting to resolve many of the issues of systemic injustice for the minorities? I think both messages have to be given in lifting up the incredible heroism our police departments and sheriff's offices do, as well as trying to solve a systemic problem in society. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bob. I appreciate it. I think the first thing I'd point to would be, first, the majority whip of the U.S. House of Representatives, Jim Clyburn, African-American. He helped desegregate countertops in South Carolina at soda fountains. Think of the kids getting milkshakes poured on them at the Woolworths in the 50s and 60s. He was one of those, and he himself has said, we are not defunding the police. This is not the intent of our legislation. And Karen Bass, who's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus from Los Angeles, former state representative there, or state senator, and now a U.S. representative, she has said, no intention here to defund the police. One of the programs we are creating as part of the Justice and Policing Act and seeking to fund is a grant program to help local communities reimagine how they might want to conduct law enforcement as it's locally defined. For instance, just in my district, we've got some school districts who are canceling or not renewing contracts for school resource officers in the high schools, where I have others who want to re-up the contracts to have local law enforcement through the school resource officer program in the schools. So, we don't want to be in a position of telling the local communities what they ought to do, but certainly giving them the options to consider how they might rethink things. And we are seeing that too. We're already, this isn't new in Snohomish County. When we are looking at the sheriff's office or even local law enforcement partnering with social workers, with the embedded social worker program, to go out into the woods, go out, in behind Home Depot on 112th in South Everett to look to find folks who are addicted to opioids. We're doing that because we're changing how we police. We're seeing addiction as a disease that needs to be fixed, not to throw people in jail for it. Now, I'm not trying to equate the Black Lives Matter movement with this. I think Black lives do matter. I am saying that there are ways to look at law enforcement differently in a lot of different ways, and how law enforcement has interacted with communities of color in the country, and even in my own district, is worth looking at. And so that we can have law enforcement, police officers and deputy sheriffs do the things that we need to do, but provide some space to look at law enforcement a little bit differently, to address some legitimate concerns. One of the jobs I have as a member of Congress is to listen to people, and I've heard a lot of things over the last 4 weeks I'm not proud about throughout the district, from folks I represent, from other people I represent. And so, you know, we need to look at ourselves as well and make some changes.
You can be very proud of the Arlington Police Department. I'll tell you that. So who else would like to ask a question?
Oh, I would, Bob. Lee here.
Please.
Well, actually, you've struck two notes. Do you support then removing the qualified liability protection for police officers? That was a part of your PowerPoint.
Yeah, the qualified immunity reform. We need to reform it. It's too broad. It's used too broadly. It started off as a fairly relative to today, a relatively narrow and specific use, and it's been broadened by the courts. And I think I agree, it's worth looking at how to bring it back to what it was.
Well, if you go down that path, are you willing to give up congressional liability protection?
I wasn't aware I've been sued a lot, so, but I'm not. But then, I think you might be proverbially mixing your metaphors a little bit.
Okay.
But the answer is no, because I would be sued a lot for just sitting here and talking to you.
All right.
Probably by some people. But that isn't what we're talking about when it comes to law enforcement. I don't have a law enforcement responsibility as a member.
But getting the Black Lives Matter, do you support the cultural destruction being perpetrated by Antifa wing of Black Lives Matter? Particularly the fact that
you're misstating it. You're misstating it.
Yeah,
Lee.
Lee.
I don't think so.
It's not an arm of the black.
Lee, I'll just be honest with you. That is a ridiculous. It's ridiculous to equate Antifa with the Black Lives Matter. There's no Antifa arm of the Black Lives Matter movement. The Black Lives Matter movement is very legitimate, has very legitimate concerns.
I certainly agree with that.
We need to address here in the United States. This whole Antifa movement, you know, I don't support that. I hope you don't support them either. But
No,
to equate the two is whoever you heard that from, you should go back to them and tell them that they were extremely wrong.
Well, how does that apply to 6 blocks in Seattle?
So that I don't know. You move to Seattle and ask your elected officials down there when you go down there. So.
Well, it looks like Black Lives Matter has been co-opted by people that have gone beyond civil rights and now wish to change the history of our government, of our nation.
I don't believe the Black Lives Matter people believe that. So I don't think we've been co-opted by anybody. I do
think there's a separation that we have to make, and that is the destructive, looting, thievery crooks.
Right.
A whole different issue than Black Lives Matter. And I think those guys need to be punished severely for their destructive behaviors. And I think peaceful protests, whether it's Martin Luther King in the 60s or these guys trying to get some attention now, is a separate topic from the destructive behavior that we've seen. And I agree with you, Lee. That destructive behavior, no room.
Good, Bob. A report yesterday from, I'll look it up. I'll get the citation, but most of that looting was done by individuals, not any organized individuals, and not Antifa individuals, just people looking out for crime.
Yep.
And that
and out of Renton.
Most of that's probably been fenced. And most of that stuff's probably been fenced already. It's people looking for, you know, or very small organized crime, looking for opportunities, and that's what's created. And that's unfortunate. And hopefully we'll grab those folks.
Good. Well, thank you, Lee. And who else has got a question?
I've got a question for him.
Please.
Good, Dave.
What the census that's going on right now, is there an expectation that Washington could get another congressional seat, or do you have any clues?
Yeah, obviously we can only influence that ourselves by filling out your census form, everybody. But even going into this year's census, the speculation, the estimates was that it's likely Oregon would get it and would get one, and Washington State would not get an additional seat. Even though our the population has grown, census reapportionment is all about relative growth, and Oregon it was projected to have grown relatively more than Washington State. So I don't see us getting an additional one. If we do, it's a nice surprise, but I don't expect that.
So I saw Ryan's note, and he says you have a 1 o'clock you need to be sensitive to. I will tell you, I appreciate you deeply taking time to meet with us. I think
Sure.
you have covered a lot of turf, and I think Lee's kind of question really brings up this country really needs to have a good conversation about who are we and where do we want to go, what do we want to safeguard, and what do we want to change. And I appreciate you walking into having those conversations with us.
Yeah, I think I will say, going back to maybe the one thing that Lee said about our history. No, I think trying to change our history is wrong. Our history is our history. I think putting things in their appropriate historical context is important. And, you know, considering how people are looking at statues and so on, I think, you know, taking those opportunities to educate folks on who these folks were, not who they were, you know, maybe deigned to be, is important. We're trying to do that here at the Capitol. I mean, there's some statues and some paintings of people who are pretty offensive and who are traitors of the country who wanted to split us up. I'm a unionist still, and I don't think people who tried to split up our country into two should be honored. But we also ought to educate ourselves and get some context of what was going on, rather than just jumping at that opportunity and then take the painting down. But I think we all ought to be looking at the context in which things were done so we can be educated into the decisions we make. And that goes for any decision we make, frankly.
But sir, what do you say to the people tearing down statues of George Washington? And when are they going to defile the Jefferson Monument?
It's important to understand the historical context of George Washington, father of the country, a slave owner who freed his slaves, a president who decided to serve, to limit himself to essentially 1.5 terms, set the precedent for somebody to step aside. All great historical context, and as a president, this statute should stay up.
I surely agree.
So clearly, it's 1
I'm
o'clock.
sure you agree that Confederate generals who tried to split up our countries, their statues should not stay. So
Rick, this is
with
the last
that,
time I try to end the program. You can keep going as long as you want.
all right, thanks. I'm talking to the city of Oak Harbor next. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.